Oh, there we go. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Eileen Donovan. I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement here at the Wyman Allen Art Museum. So thank you again for joining us for this program, Living with Color and Beauty with Alexandra Stoddard and our curator, Tanya Fort. This program is in combination with the show featured around us with items from Alexandra Stoddard's collection. This show in this space is part of our pop-up series, which began as a way to bring a little more life in beauty and color into the museum's multi-use spaces like our Lehman Auditorium. These shows are brought together with a little bit more flexibility, informality, and quick thinking than our typical museum shows, but all for the better as we look towards welcoming new audiences and making long-lasting friends with this series. For the rest of this spring, this room will be filled with student work in partnership with 6 area schools located within New London. So, over a long and remarkable career as a best-selling author and international interior designer, Alexandra Stoddard has focused on ways to incorporate beauty and color into our daily rituals to bring us happiness. A resident of Stonington, Connecticut, Stoddard lives as she writes, surrounded by art and everyday objects that instill joy. This pop-up exhibition features select art and objects from Stoddard's personal collection, including paintings, work on paper, ceramics, quotes, scarves, and vintage textiles, much of which is within this room, but also a couple more pieces and cases upstairs. Stoddard studied interior design in New York and traveled around the world before she began her career in interior design in 1961. In her work, she created a unique approach to decorating, dealing with space primarily with a point of view of color. Stoddard's design work led her to write, and she is considered one of the pioneers of the happiness movement, which is clear both in terms of personality, and the friends she has made along the road. She has written 28 books about living well. Her books and philosophies earned her widespread media attention, including features in magazines, newspapers, and TV shows such as The Today Show, Good Morning America, and Oprah. Stoddard hosted the HGTV program Homes Across America, and she wrote a monthly column, Living Beautifully, for McCall's magazine for 6 years. Alexandra has hosted happiness retreats across the country and in her hometown of Stonington, and she is the mother of Alexandra and Brooke and has 4 grandchildren. Curator Tanya Fort recently organized the Wyman Allen's banner exhibition, The Way Sisters, Miniaturists of the Early Republic, and contributed to the exhibition catalog and all of the museum's exhibitions. She has also curated Louis Comfort Tiffany in New London, upstairs in our galleries, and a range of other exhibitions. Holding a PhD in American history from the University of Delaware, she was previously a Marcia Brady Tucker Fellow in American Paintings and Sculpture at the Yale University Art Gallery, and truly a workforce within the Wyman Allen Art Museum. So just a couple of notes. We are filming this program. As we started coordinating with Alexandra, there were so many people from across the country who were interested in being here, so there is just a camera in the back. And we encourage folks at the end to also please feel welcome to ask your own questions, sign the guest book, and enjoy the entire museum after our program. So I'll hand it off to you too.
Thank you so much, Eileen, and thanks to all of you for coming out to spend time with us today. We're really grateful to be able to share this pop-up exhibition with you. Are these on? Are they working? Okay. We're grateful to be able to share this art and to have the presence of the amazing Alexandra Stoddard with us today to talk about her art, her career, her writing, her collecting, and the art of living beautifully. So it's really been such a pleasure to work with you, Alexandra, on generating this pop-up exhibition and trying to think about what pieces we could bring here from your personal collection to tell amazing stories about your life and work and the objects that you live with every day that bring you joy. And so we're delighted to be able to sort of talk about some of these today. And I wanted to also note, for those of you who maybe have not been here before, we have an exhibition up on the second floor that focuses called Chromatopia, that focuses on color and pigments and the history of the use of color by artists in art. And because Alexandra Stoddard has written an entire book about color, and color is such an important part of your career and work, it seemed like an excellent occasion to have a correspondence of this exhibition with one up on the second floor. So if you have an opportunity to go up and visit those galleries, please do. But I wondered if we could maybe just start by thinking about color a little bit. And, we tried, ended up arranging some objects within this exhibition in some groupings focused on color. But, sort of how do you live with color? How does color
Hi, thank you for coming. I'm deeply touched, and if I start to cry, it's happy tears. And I really want to just embrace every single one of you. I was trying to hug somebody earlier, and she said I have a terrible cold and started to cough, and I said, oops. But thank you for being here. I hope that the people that know me and love me know that this is a thrill of my lifetime, because I'm just celebrating the joy of color in my life. I'm a self-proclaimed everything. I'm not an artist. I'm just an enthusiast. I just love people, and I love color, and I love to live a colorful life. And so there's an expression that we were looking up on my friend Carrie Kennedy's Google. Where's Carrie sitting? Carrie, where are you? Oh, the back. Oh, of course. Very humble. Carrie and Matt are here from New Hampshire. Carrie, I said, I'm a hypocrite because I want you to tell me what a colorist is. Is there really a term for color? And she said, yes. And she said, who's the most famous colorist? And of course, it's Matisse. But the reality is that I'm self-acclaimed. I'm a colorist. I owe my entire international interior design career to the fact that I love pretty colors. And some people say they're feminine colors. No, Tommy T.B. Coe, the ambassador to Singapore from the United Nations, said, no, Alexandra, they're not feminine colors, they're beautiful colors, they're from the rainbow. And I like pastel, pretty colors, and that's what we did. We had textiles woven, and he brought me on a buying trip all throughout Southeast Asia, and I went to Thailand and had fabrics woven and for the permanent residents in New York. So the reason I got that job was not because I was better than anybody else, but he said, I want to go see the designers that I'm interviewing. I want to see how they live and where they live. And so they came to my house, and my children were young. They were toddlers, not toddlers, but they were younger than they were running around. And Tommy's wife had, she's a nurse, and she had the two sons, and they were sort of the same age as my girls. So we had a good time, and he said, you're hired. And he said, you can bring one assistant with you. And I brought my husband. So anyway, I think that if anyone leaves this museum before it closes at 5, you're not allowed to get in after 4. 4 is turn off, but it's open till 5 on front Sunday. I urge you to go upstairs. I don't ask you, I hope you will go upstairs and look at the color exhibition, because it's very, very exciting. And it makes you realize how precious color used to be before synthetics. And I think that I have a lapis lazuli, I have lapis earrings on today, but that stone was crushed to make the color blue. So we didn't always have color as available as it is now. And I used to use lead paint, and I'm sorry to say, but lead's not really good. But we used to use it in our paint. So I just want us all to realize that we can all live a colorful life. We can all be as happy as we choose to be if we're fortunate. And I feel that most people in this room are overly fortunate. And I would even say maybe privileged to live in such a beautiful part of the world, to travel here from other parts of the world. And I'm just absolutely delighted to be able to sing the praises of something that I just absolutely love, color. So I think I've nailed that one.
Thanks. It's been so interesting to sort of think about this arc of your really varied career, you know, that you've done so many things. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your early moments in life that may have inspired you and sort of launched you on this path towards striving for beauty and color and sort of the aesthetics of our lives. You know, can you think back on a moment that may have changed you or sort of turned you in that direction?
Yes. Listen carefully. For those of you who have not read my color book, Alexandra Stoddard's Book of Color, I started in my mother's flower garden. I awakened to becoming conscious when I was 3 years old. I was in my mother's cutting garden in Weston, Massachusetts on the Boston Post Road, and the cutting garden was down closer to the road from the house in the red barn on the back. It was an 18th century house, and in Weston. And I just felt the joy of being with all those pretty flowers. So my mother told me later, I was around 3 years old, when I awakened, when I became conscious. Some people don't remember their first memory as beautifully as I do, but I was in a garden and it was very pretty. And I wrote rhapsodically in my book about the murmuring bees and the flowering trees and the wonderful different flowers that I didn't know the name of, but way before I could speak and long before I could spell. I'm 81 and I can't spell, thank you. Phonetics are great, but no, you don't know what I'm trying to write. But color was my language, and I've done a lot with color. I've designed textiles. I designed fabrics for, anyway, my mother was an interior designer. My godmother was very important in my life, Missy Christian. She was on the Boston Fine Arts Museum board. She was an artist. My mother sculpted also. My first memory was a beautiful one, and nature's always been my guide. It's always been something that's been very, very important to me. And in my color book, I talk about nature influencing my interior design work. So I have the color of the garden, the color of the sea, the color of the walk in the woods. And I think that for all of us who are given the gift of eyesight, we can enjoy nature as it actually is. And we're going to talk about that at the very, very end of our talk, because I have a wonderful quote by some quotes by some of my mentor artist friends.
Fantastic.
That I know through their work.
Looking around us, this pop-up exhibition includes several of your favorite works of art, including 3 fairly large paintings by the French artist Roger Mule, who was born in 1929 and lived to 2008. These 2 here, and then one sort of on the wall to my left, back there.
And don't miss the little baby with the what do you call this, lemons.
Yeah.
That baby is very important, and we can talk about that another time. But and then I sneaked a few extra ones in this morning. There's one over there, and then there's one here. Voila.
Right, so we're lucky to have 2 additional paintings here just for today. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your love of Newell's work and your friendship with this artist and sort of what role he's played in your life and career.
I think I shared some of that with you. Roger Moule is one of the 6 most influential human beings in my life. And other than my children, my grandchildren, other than family. Roger Moule, I met him, I went to an exhibit that he had in New York City on 57th Street up a rickety elevator, number 11-13 East 57th Street. In 1961, I was asked by a interior design boss of mine to go look up this new French artist, and there was a little tiny pamphlet. It was just sort of 1 page, I think, I don't know. And I went up the rickety elevator, opened the door to this gallery, and something happened to me that had never happened before. I was 19 years old, and I felt a connection to this artist. The painting was somber, it was winter, it was silver, and it was a snow scene, and I still have it in my possession, and it's prominently displayed in my little cottage on the stairwell. It's not part of my color scheme now, nor is it his, because he burst into light in 1965 when he moved from Alsace and burst into the flaming light and colors of Provence. However, the bond was very strong, and for the first few years, the paintings were somber, and they were colors that were dark, and it made me realize that there was something here, and I followed it. So I wanted to meet him. He came to a show 2 years later. Then he came, so we met. And then when he moved to Provence, I saw him there. And he's been a friend ever since. And he was coming to New York for his last exhibition. He's had 20 solo exhibitions in New York City alone. He's had exhibitions all over the world. But I want to point your eye to this one particular painting of the sky and the water. And I'm not an artist, and I'm not going to pretend to tell you any of the nuances of this painting, but there are a lot of artists in this room, and there are a lot of artists that have looked at that painting. That's 1995 that he painted it, and it wasn't one of his exhibitions. It came in between an exhibition, so I didn't have a budget because I always bought paintings from an exhibition. I saved the money, bought a painting, and from when he would come to New York. Well, this was something that I just fell in love with, but I didn't have the funds for it. So the gallery owners put it behind, in the back, with so that it was not being viewed by other people. And I got some scaffolding, and I got some, whatever you do to prepare. There was a leak in our apartment house, and I decided that the price of that painting is what I could save if I painted and spackled and plastered the leak from my house in my bedroom in New York City. It's a big bedroom, and it was a lot of work. And we had walk-in closets, and it was really a lot of work. But I did it, and I took that money and went right down to that gallery and bought the painting. So let's all clap, put our hands together and clap for Roger Moule and this painting. Instead of giving it to an unknown painter, or a bunch of painters that would have just done it just sort of piece of parlor roller, I went in and I really went down to the wire lath, and I did a good job. And I'm proud of myself. So the painting means so much to me for every reason that you can see visually, but there's a hidden story behind everything in this exhibition. And I don't want it to be all completely hidden, because some of you know how I write books, and some of you know how I entertain, and some of you know about the happiness retreats, because some of you have been here to the retreats. But that painting was painted, it says everything about Roger Moule. If you want to know anything about him, just look at that painting. He was the happiest man I've ever known other than the Dalai Lama. He had joie de vivre. He loved life. He was passionate about life. He had no emotional problems. He married an older, wealthy French woman, Lynn, L-I-N-E, Lynn. And he was never starving, he was never a starving artist. So he painted, and he would perfect his paintings without, he painted out of the joy of life. And that painting, he was very prolific. And a lot of people said, oh, he's too prolific. He could never charge enough money for his paintings, because some of the artists that really took 2 years to paint a painting got higher prices. But he just loved to have his paintings in other people's homes. And so you look at the sun-drenched rooftops, you don't see any windows. You see the shadow, it's purple, it's not black. You see in the foreground, far right, far right, and then you see this angle, this triangle, just bringing your eye to the other side. He didn't have that to look at. He never painted outside. He sketched sometimes outside, but he always painted from the studio, and he always painted with the balance in mind of the warm colors and the cooler colors, contrasting colors. Look how much texture is in the foreground, and then look how smooth the water becomes as it goes deeper, deeper, deeper into the Mediterranean Sea, until you see this light on the other side, and you don't know whether that's a beach or a mountain, and then you look at that beautiful sky, and again, at another angle, the same angle as the rooftop. He knew what he was doing. He was intellectual. And when he wasn't painting, he was out in his garden, and he was getting those colors just in his retina, and he just loved life. I could go on and on about that one painting, but do I have time to tell one quick story? Okay. Another one of the 6 most influences in my life was my literary agent. He was a friend. He knew my first husband, who's the father of my 2 perfect children, and just a wonderful, wonderful man I met when I was 13 and curtsied to him, and then I curtsied to my second husband that I met the same year at the same tennis court. Another long story, but my first husband, yeah, it's really quite a juicy story, but if I can wrap it all up. I've had 2 wonderful Yale husbands, and I have 2 wonderful daughters by my first marriage, but so anyway, my literary agent, I have to get back to the story that I was about to tell you, but I get a little sidetracked. You have to harness me a little bit. So, my first husband, Brandon Stoddard's best friend, best man in our wedding, was Cortland Dixon Barnes Bryan III. That's kind of a long name, but he was a writer, a very famous writer, and his literary agent is my literary agent. And I wasn't famous, and I knew nothing, straight up cockamamie. I'm self-proclaimed everything because I didn't know how to write. I didn't know how to spell, but I had a story to tell, a few stories and a few messages to give, to share. So I met Carl Brandt very early on in my life, and he saw a spark in me, and I gave him my first manuscript, Style for Living, How to Make Where You Live You. And I guess it needed a lot of work because he got me a good editor at Doubleday, and she had to get 5 people to agree to publish my book, and it was published, and I was on the Barbara Walters Today Show, la-di-da-di-da-di-da. My literary agent, Carl Brandt, was he made me a writer, he turned me into a writer. I was writing in notebooks before that under trees. The trees were always flowering and perfect, and I was waiting to get on the tennis court. But I wrote anyway, and Carl and I had our typical lunch every Christmas. We would go to the Four Seasons, And that was a literary power lunch, because usually it was about a book that I was going to write, or a book that I just written that's just been accepted by the publisher. We had to talk about it. So power lunches lasted until when the restaurant opened, until the restaurant closed, and they were vacuuming the carpeting. Well, that went on for many, 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 many years. And Carl said, "I've got bad news for you." And of course, I thought it was that HarperCollins didn't like my new book, because I was waiting to hear the good news at the literary luncheon. "Oh no," he said, "I'm dying. I have leukemia, bone marrow cancer. It's very serious. I'll be dead in 2.5 years." Okay, well, we were at the pool room at the Four Seasons in New York City, and that was okay because the splash from the fountains and the water were splashing down, hiding my tears, because you don't cry when somebody tells you they're going to die, because we're all going to die. It was just a question of time. And he said, "But we've got a lot of work to do, let's get to work." So we kept working together, and I was one of the 5 authors that he remained faithful to at the end of his life. He had never been to see me in Southport, that was a Freudian slip. That's where my first husband and I met in Southport, Fairfield County. Carl came to see Peter and me in Stonington, Connecticut. He had seen all my art in the New York apartment. He came to Stonington, and this had been in the New York apartment, but then I moved it to Connecticut in 2008. And he came to see me. He died in 2013. He came to see me literally 6 months before he died. And he said, he asked me, he said, "I know you have a lot of paintings and you have extra ones. Do you think you could loan me 1 or 2 for the duration?" And I said, "You bet, but I'm not going to just send you or deliver some art to you. You've got to come pick it out." And he was not well. I mean, he was dying. So he came, and I said, "Don't bring your little car. Bring a proper car so that the paintings will fit in the car. We're not going to. This isn't a dress rehearsal. You've got to figure it out." And so he said, "Okay." So he brought his daughter's car, and he came to visit Peter and me. We went to a wonderful restaurant in Mystic, and we had a wonderful time. And he picked out 2 paintings. Peter wasn't well enough to help us take them off the wall. He wasn't well enough either, but he had a cane. So this painting was all set in my lap. One was in the living room and one was in the kitchen. I have a very nice kitchen. If any of you have been there, you know that. So Tom P. He died, and on August 13th, 2013, Peter died a year later, and the painting was still in his daughter's house, because his daughter loved going in there and meditating with the painting, because she had lived with it with her father, and that's where it was when her father died. So it was pretty exciting. So that's my story. So that painting is a little bit meaningful to me, but there are other reasons. So anyway, I think that's enough for that one.
No, it's amazing to think about, the many lives and stories that works of art contain, that have to do with how they're created, how we perceive them, how we understand them, and then thinking about, the many different sort of ways people interact with them and live with them, which I find in my job as an art historian is so fascinating, to think of kind of all the different ways that you can approach a work of art, all the different stories that it can potentially tell. And it's very exciting, to sort of think of these many circles that works of art represent and engage with. There are some pieces by several other artists here as well that you had a close relationship with. There are those 2 beautiful watercolors by Lord Alistair Gordon, along with a small watercolor here in this case, and then several porcelain fruits and vegetables by Lady Anne Gordon, and they were married. Can you talk a little bit about how your relationship with this artist couple, and how you've lived with their art and sort of helped send it off into the world with other clients and patrons also.
Remind me what you just asked me after I say that I think we should put our hands together and clap for this incredibly talented curator who's just made my life so rich and full in the past few months. And I just want to thank you, Tanya, for all you are and all you've done to make this possible. I think that one of the greatest things in our lives is the relationships we can build through art and through beauty, and the friends that we meet along the way. And thank you. And I just love this association with this art museum, and I just hope all of you will remember that art is everything. I'm a patron of the arts. When I was very young, I started collecting art, and I bought my first painting in an art gallery in Sotheby's Park Burnett auction house, in just as an unmarried teenager. So I find it's very, for me to be living with art and experiencing beautiful art every day that's all museum worthy, and being in a Connecticut art museum of this quality with Tanya, who of this great quality. She's other museums emulate her storytelling about her signage, and she's a wonderful, wonderful curator that I admire greatly, and we're going to have more interesting conversations about our shared love of art. But I feel that all of us can be art appreciators and appreciate art on every level. And I will get back to Lady Ann Gordon. I was as an interior designer, I helped influence clients to have beautiful objects around them that they loved. And there's an antique shop, Stair and Company in New York City, very fine 18th century English antiques. And Mr. Stair represented Lord Alistair Gordon and Lady Ann Gordon. You become a lady when you're married to a lord, but he was the second son, so he not only didn't get the title, he didn't get the money. Get it? Or the property. So they grew their own fruits and vegetables, and he would, and flowers, and she was the greatest living, before she died in 2008, she was the greatest living porcelain artist, and she only was represented in one gallery in England, and Mr. Stair represented both of these artists. And I was just an enthusiastic decorator that collected the pieces for my own personal pleasure, and then I would influence other clients to collect the Gordons. Well, all of a sudden I got a phone call in my office, my interior design office in New York, from Mr. Stair, and he said that he had sold his company, I knew that, to Mr. Murdoch, not the bad guy, but a financier. The bad guy's a really bad guy because he bought my publisher, HarperCollins. Really bad guy. So we're not going to get into politics, not right now, but maybe in 5 minutes. So Mr. Stair was soulful in his voice, and he said, "Could you come down and see me?" So we went down, had a power lunch. That's what you do, you know. You eat. In those days, he even had a sip of wine at lunch. Carl used to have martinis, but anyway. So he said that Mr. Murdoch bought the company, everything was going smoothly, swimmingly, until he said, "I'm sorry, but we can't represent the Gordons because they're not 100 years old." in order to be an authentic antique. You have to, I mean, in an antique. So, is that true? Right? Okay. Mary Grace, I've abbreviated her name. I call her Grace because I pretend I can't remember her full name. It's okay. Everybody puts up with me. Some people don't, but that's okay. So, I said, are you kidding? Of course I can represent Lord and Lady and Gordon. And Mr. Stair said, well, Alexandra, you have to have capital. And I said, what? And that's money, I guess. And, you know, so I got on an airplane, I flew down to Texas, and I got one of my clients that has 3 children that were also my clients in Amarillo, Texas. Have you ever heard of Amarillo, Texas? Well, they all had ranches, and they had cattle, and that's beef, and that's very expensive, you know. But then all of a sudden things started gushing up from the soil. You know, gravitas goes down, but this was coming up. And so they all became billionaires very fast. And so I asked my client, Estelle Marsh, and then she married Watlington. I asked her if she wanted to be in on a deal with me. Peter and I wanted to support 2 English artists. And she loved Anne Gordon's work, and she loved Alistair's work. And she said, sure. And she had her sons draw up a contract, and boy, it was some contract. She got equal. Not, you know, sometimes backers get some, but not all. Well, 1/3 for Alexandra, AEP Associates. A for Alexandra, E for Estelle, first name, and P for Peter. Peter was my lawyer, I was the go-getter, and she was the money bags. She put Halston in the business on a $10,000 investment. She got $10 million return for it. Hello? I wore Halston to my wedding. So Estelle was my friend, she was my client. I used to have rugs made for her with 38 colors in Portugal, and she would put them outside for a month because she wanted to look sun-faded. Well, they got sun-faded all right in that Texas sun. So I did a rant for her. She said, don't come down empty-handed. She got in a private plane for me, and she said, come down with some chintz. So I found a bowl. I found one of my Brunschwigger and Captain Attempt to get me a bowl of chintz. I needed a whole bowl, 50 yards, and we had a sew-in at the ranch. Well, I have a lot of memories. Anyway, I'm getting off subject. Let's talk about these things. So this you have to look at. So he's up in the attic. They're poor. They didn't inherit the money. They just have Lady and Lord. And so he paints up in the attic, and she goes out in the garage and pots, and they've got this little rickety little car that doesn't have any, you know, it rains a lot, but the car is always outside, and she's in doing her pottery and with her kiln and everything. And so, anyway, that's my story, and we did just fine. Peter and I would have a reception in New York and invite people. And they would come and we'd buy out the whole, whatever they made, but whatever came out of the crate, they had professionally crated. I just wrote them a check ahead of time before the crate left. And so that was that story. But there's one larger watercolor upstairs, and then there's some Lady Anne Gordon's in the yellow case there. Okay, how are we doing on time?
We don't have a ton of time left.
Okay, then we can speed things up.
Yeah.
You're the boss. By the way, this whole thing was curated by her. She was the caboose. She picked the art. She picked what we're going to do, and I put a Murano swizzle stick about this size in one of the wine glasses, and she said, "I think we can take that out." I mean, ta-da.
No.
Oh yes. No, you put the whole thing together, and you picked my favorite painting. I did not influence you. You liked it.
It's a beautiful painting. And no, it's been so much fun to kind of see how you live with objects in your beautiful home, and to walk in and feel welcomed by these amazing floral displays and just sort of beautiful, simple things in your home that have been such an inspiration. Just to think about you know, how you can sort of live in an inviting, beautiful space. And I love love, for example, this little yellow case back behind you in the corner. Several of those pieces are a kind of fairly permanent fixture on that little table, sort of just to your right around the corner as you walk in your home. And I wonder, I don't know, if you want to just talk a little bit about what it's like, to have this beautiful kind of lemon-themed arrangement of pieces in your parlor, your sort of front room there.
It's pure joy.
Yeah. And do you miss them, having them?
No, I like them right here, right now, with you, to see them. No, I do not miss them.
Well, we're so lucky to have them here, to be able to kind of benefit from your eye and your ability to arrange things so beautifully. Another really stunning idea that you had was to bring these scarves in. Can you tell us a little bit about them? They look so kind of colorful and cheery in this room, which is multi-purpose and, not brightly colored otherwise. I think it's been such an exciting jolt of color to have these here. But these are pieces that you've worn over the years.
They're my scarves.
Right.
Hello.
Tell us a little about that.
Well, Tanya, I bought my first Emilio Pucci scarf in 1961 in Florence for $8. I have been collecting scarves because they're joyous. And the only time that I've ever framed one or two or three or four is when clients didn't have the budget to buy a painting of this comparable size. And they would buy a pretty scarf and frame it and put it, in. But I love to wear them. I love to look at them. And one time you came to my house because I felt that I could wash it myself, and it was hanging up to dry on a windowsill, and said, "Isn't that colorful?" On a gloomy, rainy, sleety day when it gets dark really early, it's kind of not so shabby to hang one over a curtain rod and just let the sunshine in. But I love them, and I had a dream. Literally, it was a dream where in this space, because I wasn't here and I didn't technically know what was possible, that we could have just banners of them all the time, because I have plenty. But we brought them all here, and we had them on a table, and you just pick some. And that was it. And I thought they were going to go here and there, but we didn't want to impinge on this painting here, and you were absolutely right. So your eye is impeccable. I value that. But I love them, and I have been wearing, I have not been able to wear these colors because I've been wearing blue and yellow for almost a year. The Ukrainian war will be a year on the 24th of February. So I've decided that because of this color exhibition, and largely because of you and me and you're agreeing to put these on this clothesline, I decided that I will wear my scarves again and still honor the Ukrainian solidarity with some little touch of yellow and blue. So, and then going back to the, have we talked about the vintage?
No.
No, okay. Do you want to? Okay. Well, why not?
Yeah.
The reason those are hanging there is because when I was very young, I went to work in 1993. I went to work for Macmillan Incorporated, and our clients were all in the social register, and they all had enough money to go buy Porto linen. Porto is the finest linen company in Paris. And these are all vintage, and every single one of them is hand sewn, whereas now they don't have the scallop anymore. They have a wave because they're all machine stitched now. Porto, I went to Paris many times. Nope, you cannot get anything like this anymore. So I have the real McCoy, and these are, some of them have holes in them. feel free to go up to them and touch them, because some of them were so fine because they've been washed so many times. And the reason that they're not sculpted on all four sides and they're not square is because when I was very, very young and started collecting one at a time, you don't have to buy 2 dozen of anything. I would buy one at a time because that's all I could afford. When my clients were buying 2 dozen, 4 dozen, 6 dozen, they had 4 houses, I don't know. So these are only sculpted in the top and bottom. They're not sculpted on 4 sides, so they're half price. They have as many stitches, hand stitches in those scallops. I mean, I don't know, but I went to the quilt exhibition at the Griswold, and there were 18 stitches to the inch. I mean, these are really beautifully made, and they're lovingly enjoyed, and some of them do have holes in them. That makes them even more precious to me, but I use them, and that's why they're here.
Fantastic, thank you. We sort of wanted to think a little bit about and talk a little bit about how this project originated very briefly, and also how things evolved. In the very beginning, Emmeline McEwen is a friend of yours and works here, and she had met with you and talked about maybe focusing on your large exhibition of quilts. And that was the kind of first opening conversation. And then we talked about that a little bit, and then some time elapsed. I think I had to work on another exhibition, and then the holidays happened. So we reconvened in very early January, and you had some shifts in terms of kind of your collecting and your quilts, and even before that, I guess, we had broadened the scope to think about, your broader collection and how it made sense to focus on paintings and, a lot of the things that we normally, we show here at an art museum. But I think it was interesting that some of the things that you owned had gone out into the world. You had begun a de-accessioning project, and I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit.
De-accessioning is a museum term. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah.
Is it in the dictionary? Is? Am I spelling it right?
De-accession is
Well,
the opposite
anyway,
of accession.
D means
To get rid of things.
accession, yeah. De-thugging, decluttering, whatever. I'm going to tell you very quickly because we have to rock and roll, I guess. That's okay.
Yeah.
We don't have a timeline. If anyone has to go to the bathroom, they can walk out. Okay, so we have you hostage. What are we going to talk about?
De-accessioning. Just your shift in sort of mindset.
I thought that I was an archivist and I had to save everything that I loved for the rest of my life, and then it would be in a museum sometime, and it would be the Alexandra Stoddard. I don't know if she's dead, but look at all the beautiful things that she loved. And I was going to have Peter's eyeglasses right next to his desk that he was writing his last memoir on, and all of a sudden I had surgery, and it was really important surgery because it was my brain and my heart, and I woke up and my children came and brought me flowers, and I said, let's put the bed by the window. I'm alive, let's get going. I've just got to wake up, and I woke up. I just knew that I didn't want to have all this stuff to have my 2 perfect daughters and my 4 grandchildren have to wade through after I'm popped off. And I'm going to pop off eventually, and I don't think it's going to be soon. But I'm so excited it might be, I don't know. So I literally went completely full circle. Instead of saving all my unpublished manuscripts, all my everything, all my art, I had 80 Roger Moule paintings. That's a lot of paintings. I'm the largest private collector of Roger Moule. Blah, 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 blah. So they were in the attic, and I when I left New York, Peter and I moved here. The movers came and a lot of stuff went up on 3, including 60 quilts. And that's not a good place for quilts, with the sun bleaching and then the exterminator coming and putting poison all over the quilts, and they weren't being loved up and folded all properly, and they were good quilts too, some of them. So I had to, Emmeline and a friend of mine, an artist friend of mine, was here. We had dinner at Noah's, and Emmeline said, "Oh, that's great! You're so colorful, and you're so colorful, and and you love color. So we'll just have a pop-up on color, and quilts are so colorful." So I thought, oh my gosh, I haven't looked at these quilts for years. They were in a New York apartment, and our New York apartment, and I didn't know what to do. So I got 2 quilt experts to revisit my passion for quilts, because I knew a lot about quilts in the 80s. But then my quilt phase came and went, and I had all these quilts in the attic, and what am I going to do with all these quilts? And they're going to be in a museum. I've got to know what these quilts are, and I've got to be sure I know what they are and who they were made by and what year they were. So I got these 2 quilt experts to come. They've written lots of books and they're very famous. And they told me, no, not museum worthy, no. None of these are museum worthy. The one on the left one is a grandmother's flower garden. But what question did you ask me?
Just thinking about sort of deaccessioning.
Deaccession. So what happened was there was going to be a quilt exhibition. There was nothing else. And then Tanya came, and you came an hour and a half early because you were told by Emmeline to come at a certain time, and I was told by Emmeline another time. It's just called time, whatever. But the garbage is still on the street because I didn't know that the day before that it was this holiday and they were going to pick up the garbage next day. So Tanya had to trip in a very, very severe rainstorm, trip over my garbage on the way, because I had it right in front of the center for the garbage men. It's a good place for it. And anyway, so we met. And it was all about quilts, and they looked through all my quilts, only 40. I hid 20 from them, and then I gave them 20 away. So now they have 40 to look at. Oh, and they all loved all these quilts. And then we can end this quilt story, because then when people came to take 120 Lady Anne Gordon pieces of porcelain for an auction house in Hudson, New York, called Stair. It's the grandson of Stair and Company. They came with a huge truck and a packer, professional packer, packed them up, and the porcelain expert from Stair and Company, because the grandson knew who I was and the grandfather, and the thread of continuity was so perfect to get it. Start with Mr. Stair and end with the grandson. So they're going to be auctioned off starting in April. Stair, it's going to be so exciting to see 79 different lots of her porcelain is going to be sold. Anyway, hello, and at lunch we were having a sandwich salad lunch in the kitchen, and her packer is wonderful. And I looked at her, looked at the porcelain buyer, and I said, do you deal with quilts? So the packer, before he went off to New York with all my porcelain, he put in all my quilts except for a few, that's why they're here. And so I didn't, after Tanya came to the house and saw my art, I said, Tanya, I don't know if I said it first or whether you thought about it, but I sort of said, Tanya, you're an art gallery. Don't you want a few paintings? Oh, shucks. Okay, that's the end of that.
Thank you. No, and it's fantastic, and I think it makes much more sense to show just the variety and the wealth of different objects that represent you and your aesthetics and your history. So I think it was an excellent and fortuitous set of circumstances.
Well, they're going to have an Americana sale, and there'll be quilt lovers, and people from all over can just love the quilts that they got. But I saved these 2 I particularly love, and I love the way you selected them. You didn't select them. One is a trip around the world, and that has, you're allowed to touch it because I'm giving you permission. You can turn over the edge. I hand sewed when I bought it. I bought it at an auction in Paris, so an American must have gone to Paris, and it was auctioned, and it had a black trim, a black border, and I just didn't want the par noir pour moi. I didn't want the black, so I got rid of the black, and somehow that was fortuitous because you were able to use the black as a
Right, the sewn over section.
Section,
Pocket
for the, yeah.
to hang it.
And then the other quilt that I just absolutely love, it has 75 different textiles in it, is the fan quilt. And it's sort of ordinary, but it's nice stitching. It's nicely stitched. But there are some quilt lovers and people that know quilts in this room that have collections, serious collections. But it was so irreverent of me to realize that out of the grandmother's flower garden, the one on the left-hand side with the path going across in those dark green, what do you call those, triangles or whatever they are, shapes. It's much more unusual. Anyway, I love the fact that these are the ones that I'm going to live with and probably have on my deathbed. So I don't know, maybe one on top of the other, or I don't know. But I'll rotate and see what day. But I sort of pre-selected for you. So you got to pick from a few.
Yes. One other thing I think I wanted to be sure we mentioned is that there's this large glass display case here, and there's another display case up on the first floor, both of which feature examples of writing and focus on the art of writing, which has been really handwritten, both in terms of writing letters and postcards, but also you've handwritten all of your manuscripts for your books, an important part of your process and your aesthetic. And so there are some accoutrements and examples of some of the note cards where you've done draft writing of ideas that have gone into these projects. So I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about the objects that are associated with writing by hand, and some of the treasures and ideas that go along with making that an important part of your practice.
I love to write with fountain pens. I love to write. I love to feel. I love to have a fountain pen in my hand. The ink dries up, so you have to dip it in a fountain, in an inkwell. I love ink. I love the smell of it. I love to write on smooth colored paper. I love to have the silence and just the nib squeak across paper. I've bought paper in Paris that came from a mill that was 750 years old 6 years ago. So I have an attachment to it, to paper, to stationery stores, to the French Bristol cards, very smooth cards that I buy in France, and friends bring them to me that go there more often than I have recently. I love to feel that my brain and my hand are connected in some soulful way. I understand that people use computers, and I understand the value of that, and I understand how instantaneous you can get information. But I'm inspired by my soul, being nurtured by what I really have found is my process. And this goes back to when I was not wanting to be my own secretary. I always hired secretaries. I had an international design company. And I always hired people to do things that they were good at that I just didn't choose to do. And I, to this day, have people help me with technology. And friends get frustrated with great regularity because I don't know what they know as soon as they know it. And I sometimes have asked somebody to tell me something that I can't get. I have to get new dictionaries every few years because you could see in an old dictionary when somebody was born, but you can't see when they died. And I want to know, is this, if I missed an obituary in the New York Times, I want to know. Anyway, the long story short is that I love my process, and I will probably, with my rheumatoid arthritis, is sometimes it gets flared up and I have terrible, terrible pains, swollen, and my shoulder gets involved, and it's all connected. But I think that I will use my energy and my passion and my love of writing and as long as I can with the pen. And all the things that go with letter writing, fountain pens, I've rather large collection. If anybody wants a fountain pen. They're not for the ones that I have here, please don't take them home, those are not souvenirs. But they're all different colored inks. Maybe some of you have noticed that I put, some have green ink and a red, or blue ink and a yellow one. I just mixed it up to just surprise you because we are at a color exhibition. And I'll be short because I know. But this, if you look on the far right-hand side, you'll see some Bristol cards that I write just notes to myself to inspire myself. If I read something that inspires me, I will write it on a card, and in fact I'm going to quote from some artists that I treasure that I've written down. But then you'll see the whole process. I love postcards. I want you to be sure to take a postcard home with you to bring the memory of today home. I collected postcards from all over the world, mostly Europe and the United States, but I want to just thank my daughter, Brooke. Brooke, would you raise your hand just so everybody can see how beautiful you are? And Cooper and Tony, her husband, Tony, Cooper, my granddaughter. Thank you. And you should admire Cooper's sweater because she got it in Paris recently, for Thanksgiving actually, with the rainbows on the side. It's French design, of course. But Brooke came over and tweaked all my, she was style editor of Passing Guard magazine for forever, and I want to just say that she just tweaked things, and she's pre-edited before I showed you, because I had these things set up on different tables. Tanya would give me the size of the display cases, and then I would tape off a surface, and I had them out, and Brooke came over and and little things like, Mom, how can you possibly have anything on display without flowers? Well, what do you put under lucite? You have to have artificial flowers. So I got some silk flowers, and friends helped. I mean, anyway, there are hundreds of thousands of people that help support whatever your journey is, but the passion has to be there. And this shows the process. So I had an editor who was going to lose her baby if she was standing up vertically, and she was in the hospital for more than from less than 3 months pregnant, and every single lie flat, and she couldn't read manuscripts, she couldn't sit up, she couldn't have visitors, and so I made a little for her husband. She lived next 1 block down from me in New York, and every single day her husband he could go see her, but I couldn't. I would give her a postcard, not of a little child in case she lost the baby, but of some beautiful art. And I was so passionate that I decided, now I've got soul bumps. I was so passionate that I decided that I had to put a book together. So I bought 1,000 postcards from museums all over Europe and decided which ones, and sometimes I would get 920 or 750, but I didn't get 1,000. I wanted to have 1,000 for the first printing. So anyway, I got it all together, and I have the postcard as art, bring the museum home. And Brooke will remember, she's the only one in this room because Cooper wasn't born, but she will remember playing the postcard game. So you go to a museum, dragged at gunpoint. I don't believe in guns, but encouraged by enthusiastic mother. And you go to Paris, and you go to a museum, and you go to the gift store, and you would select some postcards. Any postcard that you were drawn to that was in the museum collection. And then you got to do whatever you wanted to do for the rest of the day. In the town where we were, the city where we were, swimming. Well, that was difficult in Europe, but we worked that out. And then they scamper around and find the postcard. Sometimes they would pick a detail, and then the painting would be the Venus of the mouth. They would not know that they had a detail, so they would not really see it at first sight. But you send them back until they found it. If I knew it was in the museum, anyway. So that's my story about postcards. I'm passionate about them. Anyone can collect beauty. Anyone can collect art. If you can't afford to buy a Roger Moule painting or a Lord Alistair Gordon, you can buy a lithograph. If you can't afford a lithograph, you can afford a print. If you can't afford a postcard, everybody can be a collector and support the arts. Yay, yay, yay. Everybody.
I think that we have sort of run out of time, alas, because we were going to...
Time doesn't run out.
Well, but maybe we can sort of adjourn and then have individual, an opportunity for folks to say hello, ask a question to Alexandra if they choose. We have a few books that we might bring down for sale, or if you brought a book, she's graciously offered to perhaps sign a few. And we want to thank you again for coming. Did you have one last quote?
See, she's editing me. I had 5. She said 1. 1? Oh, you're going to make me cry. 1? 1? All right, we'll see me later, okay?
5. Maybe 2.
Say 5 again, okay? Maybe she'll give you... okay. 5? 5. 2. Okay, all right. Some people can walk out the door and I wouldn't be hurt at all because I know that I'm on borrowed time. But you see, this is once in a lifetime. We'll never be here again. Never. So this is very important. Thank you for indulging me. Thank you. And I'm aware of this too. I'm very aware. Robert Henry wrote a book that when I was writing my first book, The Art Spare by Robert Henry. It was published in 1923. This is a well-loved book. And Brookie was over yesterday afternoon, and I said, Brookie, do you have time to let me just read you one thing I want to think of reading at the talk on Sunday? And I started, she said, Mom, I read that at Dad's funeral, Dad's celebration of his life. So somehow we were all connected. There are moments in our lives, there are moments in a day when we seem to see beyond the usual. Such are the moments of our greatest happiness. Such are the moments of our greatest wisdom. If one could but recall his vision by some sort of sign, it was in this hope that the arts were invented. Signposts on the way to what may be. Signposts toward greater knowledge. So I urge you to, if you feel the art spirit, I urge you to read this book. I've given it to all my artist friends who weren't familiar with it, and they've been deeply grateful because he wrote it to his students. It's said it's just a beautiful book. that he talks about different artists' attributes and what they give us. And Carrie Kennedy. Carrie, would you and Matt please raise your hands? They're way in the back. Don't be shy. Carrie came yesterday to see me for a little fun time to be here to support me. She's always here at the most meaningful times of my life. And Matt has also turned up in the most meaningful times of my life. And we were at the museum this morning, at the Seaport Museum, looking at the sergeants and the whistlers and the Murano glass. And you'll see Murano glass in my little case there. And please look at the cones of the glass, because they cut those cones to make beads. You'll see all that. If any of you are from out of town and want to go to that exhibition, they're open 7 days a week from 10 to 5, and you should go. Everybody's an honored guest here, but Lisa, raise your hand. She just came from Canada. So you've all come from home, and you've made an effort to be here, so I'm grateful. So Tanya, yes or no?
Maybe one parting quote.
One parting quote?
To think about.
So how do you edit Van Gogh, Claude Monet, Matisse? How do we decide? I know. So how? I think I have to use my heart here. Why don't I pretend this is one card? Can I do that? Okay. How about 3? How about 3? Is that cheating? 3? How about really reading fast? How about 4? Maybe more. 2 quick ones? Okay. Very quick. Okay. Roger Moule. Look at Roger Moule, okay? To paint is to bring color to its maximum intensity so that it becomes vibration and light. Okay, thank you, Roger. You taught me about that. Okay. Van Gogh. If you hear a voice within you say, you cannot paint, then by all means paint. And that voice will be silenced. I'm really a quick reader. Okay, all right, one more. This is one more. See, one more. They stuck together. I can't help it. Okay, this is the wrap-up. This is really final. We're talking about color, nature, and we're talking about, what else are we talking about? Collections, being a patron of the arts. Oh, we're reading the quote. We're reading the quote. We're reading the quote, that's right. We're reading the quote. Okay, this is nature, this is wrap-up. Only the artists are on the right track, for it may be that only they can bring beauty into our lives. To give the world reason without artists is impossible. Clemenceau said that about Claude Monet. He was the World War I statesman. Now, here's the absolute finale. This is the curtain closed. If one truly loves nature, one finds beauty everywhere. Eventually, my eyes were opened, and I really understood nature. I learned to love at the same time. Claude Monet. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.